Hey everybody, Robert with RC Archery. You're watching Tuesdays of the week number 120. In this week's video, I'm going to go over what I'm measuring and why when I go to swap my strings out. And this is going to make your process a ton easier, and it's going to make your tuning and your setup after the fact a lot simpler as well. What I like to do when I'm taking care of this is making a list, a note on my phone. That's an easy way for me to keep track of that. That way, if I'm on the go or away from maybe notes at my house or something like that, I can be able to still keep track of things. If anything shifts, moves, if I need to change something, if something breaks, anything like that, I know where to go and put back on it. So this is the list that I use. You can see here that I've customized this to myself and what I like to follow, but you've got your axle to axle length, brace height, peak weight, holding weight, let off percentage calculation, tons of info on here. I even go so much as to take photos of different things so I know where my bars are set up, where the angles are set. I'm looking at, like my knock height, like all kinds of stuff. So I get pretty nerdy into it all, but having all of those measurements for me, especially with a target set up, that's just going to be bulletproof for me going forward, and it helps me be able to get everything working again. Now for me, I'm a big advocate of have your own tools and be able to make all these adjustments and do this yourself. It's a learning experience. You're probably going to screw some things up. You may, still mess some things up later on. I do too. But knowing how your equipment works is invaluable. But being able to do the work yourself allows you to be able to be more meticulous and nerd out on some things, kind of like I do, so that you have more control over the situation. But if you do need to go to a pro shop and you are going to have them change your strings and do this, you may have to hound them to do it a certain way, or you may have to work with them or have some stuff going on. But you can do these measurements before you get to a pro shop on a lot of them, or you can ask them to check it before they start swapping your strings out. That way you kind of got your own little notes. Maybe you write them down or whatever you're doing. But if you just take your bow to a pro shop, they're not going to do what we're doing. They're going to pull your strings off. They're going to put some new ones on. They're maybe going to check your draw length through, shoot it through paper when you're done. That's all they're going to do. It's just going to be like you set up a new bow. There's going to be very few places you can go to that will really take the time to be meticulous with it and actually set it up the way that it was prior. If you do have a shop like that, it's a great shop. Keep going there. Comment down below. Put that shop's name down in the comments where it's located, because those, if they're going to be really good, would be great. Maybe if somebody else is in your area, they would know they can go there too. But I'd like to start out, I'm just going to go over some things here. There's checks and balances, and I've done this differently over the years with different equipment. So I'm going to give you some different ways to do some of this so that you can see it, versus maybe if you just don't have all this equipment or feel comfortable doing it one way or the other. But first thing that I like to do here is check everything with my bubbles. I set a bubble up on the string, make sure everything is level left and right, up and down, back and forth, all of that stuff. And then I put a level on my arrow. And for me, I want to see when the bow is perfectly level, what the bubble looks like on that arrow. And ideally, you're probably going to have this where you can have the bubble in the middle. It's a little bit easier when you do that. It doesn't always have to be that way. And you may have already tuned your bow up based off the set of strings that are on the bow. So you may not actually be doing that. Like on my bow personally, this bow is not bubbling directly in the middle. It was a little bit knock high. I actually find that these bows tune really well with just a tiny bit knock high. And at least for my setup in the arrow that I'm running right now. So that's where I've got it set up. For me, what I like to do is actually use a bow square. So I will take this drop away that I have, loosen the cord off so that the launcher blade is sitting upright. And then I will put that bow square on there and run it down to where it just touches the launcher blade, and then mark where the middle of the knock point, where the knock is on the string, the middle of that with whatever coincides on that bow square for the measurement. And that makes me a solid marking so that I can generate the same loop height that I have on the current set of strings, because that's where I held the best and that's where the bow is aiming the best. So I want to get that back. You can do that with the levels on the bubble. If you're going to do it that way with a bubble level, I generally recommend people to put the bubbles, everything square, everything in the middle. So like for this one, I would need to raise that rest and bump it up just a little bit so that I can make sure it's just a lot easier to replicate when you go to switch strings and swap them out. All right, the next part of this can be very controversial depending on who you ask, but I'm going to explain why I do it the way that I do. If that makes sense to you and you want to replicate that, more power to you. I personally feel like it's the right way to do it. I measure my axle to axle length and my brace height as a checks and balances so that I can judge if I'm getting everything back into the same specs when I put the bow back together with the new strings. But I am not using that as my basis on how cam rotation is and what I'm actually at on a bow. When I'm setting up a bow, when I'm working with it, and when I am checking all this, I want hard numbers. I want the real numbers. And for that, you actually have to put the bow on a draw board, draw it back and get your peak weight and get your holding weight and calculate your let off percentage and double check it off the draw length. Now, every brand of bow handles this a little bit differently. The majority of bows that you will get in whatever brand you get, the majority of those bows will have paper specs for your axle to axle and your brace height, but it may not actually coincide with where you're at for your draw length, your peak weight, your modules that are on the bow, whatever it may be. So that's why I say they're a guideline. You may not be exactly perfect. And honestly, if you're adjusting things and needing to get a little bit longer draw length or a little shorter draw length, maybe you're adjusting how the cams are rotating for holding weight and let off percentage, things like that, those axle to axle and brace height numbers are going to change. So if you're doing some things like that, they're definitely going to be different, but a lot of the times they're different even pulled straight out of the box. With these Hoyt bows, the new Concept X, I have a 37 model here, talked to some other archers. What they have told me and what I have found with my own is absolutely true. It seems that these bows are about an 1/8 inch long on whatever draw length module that they have, because they have the grips that you can put on there to take that 1/8 of an inch away and make it dead even again. But that, along with the spec mods that you can have 1/4 inch draw lengths, it's going to help you be able to micro adjust draw length in 1/8 of an inch increments in reality. So my bow is set up at 28 1/8, which is perfect for me. That's roughly where I like most model bows that are this axle to axle. So that works out great for me. My axle to axle length is 37 1/8. My brace height is 6 and I think it was it's just under 15/16. So if you look at it based off the numbers, I'm not exactly in spec, but I'm close. But my let off percentage, the way that I had the cams rotated, gets me about 73% let off right now versus 75, which is where the mod setting is. So under rotated the cams just a little bit. It's really not that much to get that extra draw weight on there. I actually have the top cam hitting just slightly above the bottom one. But knowing that measurement and knowing what I am doing with the cams and the starting position and how soon one cam is hitting before the other, all of that is information that I note and then I may take pictures of, and I'm gonna have that information so that I can go and put this bow back exactly how it was ahead of time. All right, the last couple things that we're gonna talk about here, one's pretty obvious, but I'm also gonna give you some bonus tips with the items that I have in my hand here. Definitely wanna make sure that you're measuring your peep height. I tie knock sets in top and bottom, below and above my knock. So that's what I use as my measurement point. I take the bottom edge of that top knocking point, use that and measure up to the center point of the peep. That way that I have that measurement, you can put it right back to where it was when you got, before you took the strings off, before you started changing everything. And then I also measure my loop length. I use, you can do this a lot of different ways. I've used just a tape measure in the past. You can do it that way. You can use some, digital calipers, different things like that, however you want to get into that. But make sure you're measuring that as well. And then that way you know exactly where to put everything back. Now, a couple bonus tips that I have for you. If you're changing the strings out yourself, have a paper clip. When you're taking whatever string you're starting with, so if you take the string or a cable or whatever you're doing to start with, when you pull that off the bow, you'll need a paper clip to be able to tie those end loops together. That way they're not twisting or moving or doing anything while you're working on getting your new string set or new cable or whatever it is put on there. What I do is I start with my bowstring, take that off, put the new one on. Once I get the new one on there, I have that extra paper clip. I'll switch it out with whatever I just used, and then I'll use this one again on the next cable or whatever I'm doing from that point. The other thing that I would recommend having is a chip clip. Super simple. Don't get the aggressive ones. Just get something with a rubber end or some little plastic ones like this that have a magnet on the back of them. When I'm doing this, there are times where I need an extra set of hands because of I'm working with cables or end loops, or there's 5 pieces of a cable and string set like what I have on this Hoyt bow here, like PSCs, a lot of them have. When I'm doing that, I can clip an end loop so I don't have to worry about it unraveling or doing anything weird. And this is a magnet. It'll sit right there on my bow press and I don't have to worry about it moving. So have a couple of those available so that it just makes your life and makes your job a ton easier for you. And that way you're not stumbling around, putting end loops in your mouth, dropping something, causing, things to happen. If you do all of this correctly, it's not bulletproof that it's going to fix everything for you and make it easier. There are times, depending on the colors and the materials of strings, the strands are thicker or thinner than maybe what you're taking off and putting on. The current string set that's on the bow may have stretched and been out of spec, and you may need to adjust things to take your new string and cable set and take it out of spec to match what you had if that's what you need. So keep that in mind. But stock strings that I have on the bow, I keep them on there for a few weeks just to make sure that I'm dialing everything in until I feel it's perfect. I order an aftermarket pair. I take the stock ones off. I put them back in the package of the new aftermarket ones and throw them in my bow case. Those are my reserves, my extras. If something were to happen and I cut something on my string with a peep, or who knows, an accident happens, right? I can switch out, if I need to, just one cable, one string, whatever it may be. I have a whole new set to put back on there if I need it. Whatever's going on, you have an emergency backup plan, and that's what I'm using. This bow is super simple for me, taking all these measurements before and after. You can see here that the bullet holes on the left that were bare shafts were the first 3 shots out of this bow, and then the bullet holes on the right there with the Fletch shafts were the first 3 after I adjusted, after I swapped my strings out and everything. So, it's super simple for me. This has been a great bow and an easy one to tune as well. So if you're in the market for one, I bought this with my own money, by the way. I'm not represented by Hoyt, but I really do think it's a great bow to run with. So if you have any questions on anything, comment down below, let me know. If you're still watching to this point, comment down below Archery Vision. I appreciate y'all that stay to the end of these videos. That is awesome for the algorithm here in YouTube. And make sure you're liking, subscribing, have the bell notifications on too, so you can get some notifications when these videos come out. Try to keep these on a pretty normal schedule every Tuesday, but life gets in the way sometimes, so you never know. But thank you again, guys, for watching this video today. I'll see you soon.